looking back on the entire, from the moment like you envisioned this grand project to now, if you were told, okay, you could re-enter that, but with this perspective, what would be the three top things that you would alter, if anything?
I'd be less attached, number one. Even though I tried to be, it was harder than I realized. I thought I was not attached, but I was still. Um,
How would you go about doing that?
oh, I don't know. I would just. I don't know how I would go about by non-doing. I think more than anything, but it's hard to say. It's not. I wouldn't really change anything. It was a great learning experience. It was pain. There was some challenges and there was tension that happened over the course of the time.
With hindsight on that tension note, which is very rich to plumb without judging, what
One of the big problems with that was the fact that one of the things that led to tension was the cameras being there. But I wouldn't want to not have the cameras there, because the video footage of it is so
rich,
amazing and important. And I was thinking about that as saying, well, maybe I wouldn't have cameras because it led to a lot of tension.
Really, people were self-conscious?
Well, it just was intense over 6 days having cameras around. But like capturing those sessions was what was so magical about it, on film. And in the future, any sessions that I'm doing like that, live ones, I'm trying to capture. And people know about it in advance,
Sure.
But so yeah, it's hard to say. Like, I mean, when I did the version in 2018 with Carl Berger and 16 other musicians, there was no tension. It was just really, really beautiful for 6 straight days. It was also a very rotating group. Carl and me were the only 2 remaining people. It was really our collaboration. And then we brought in all these other people.
And where did you record? Here in the barn.
Studio, yeah. And but I think that I learned a lot from the first, and the primary thing I think I learned about that I learned a very deep lesson that we were just speaking about was that if you're going to try to bring something that is esoteric or practices that are esoteric, you have to be very cautious about who you ask to do that. And in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the more I've read about that and the more I've understood, it's actually considered a breaking of vows to talk about emptiness and to teach emptiness to someone who's not ready for it.
Well, in biblically, it's don't cast pearls before swine.
Yeah.
And that's not meant to be a horribly derogatory image.
Not at all.
It's just a recognition.
It can be damaging to the person.
It can be damaging the person because their receptivity is
and to the external environment.
Right. Yeah. And then everything gets impacted that touches upon, which fast forward to entering the space in the basilica, that's part of what I think was being experienced even without any conscious recognition.
Yeah. And I mean, the big thing related to that I've learned in general from my own spiritual practice, primarily in Buddhism, but of course, yogic, Vedantic theory, whatever, and more, but starting in Buddhism and kind of coming back to it, really, I was always non-defining myself as I didn't want to be defined, meaning that seeing the perennial philosophy, right? Which I believe in, the perennial philosophy, of course, but I now kind of define myself as a Buddhist to people because of the fact that, as you know, Thich Nhat Hanh was so instrumental in pulling me out of the abyss, my mid-20s. And then so many moments of healing in the Buddhist tradition and from the Buddhist teachings that at one point I just realized, I need to honor those teachers as much as possible. And in my life now, actually, I see the greatest thing that I can do is to try to support Buddhist causes more than anything, because it's like we live in an extraordinary era where the Dharma has now come to the West for the first time in the history of the world within the last 100 years. It's nothing. And like, in a way, the Buddhist teachings have just been born. So like the greatest thing that I can do in my life outside of raise my son is just actually try to help Dharma survive to the next generation and beyond, so that's like where I'm seeing myself. My energies are going more and more into that, because I just see it as the precious jewel that in my life, I mean, I know there's other paths. I'm not saying it's the only path,
No,
but it's
I'm
the
not
path that
hearing
liberated
that.
me.
Yes.
From my own suffering.
And it's very, as you say, as time says, always honor your root tradition.
Yeah.
It's one of the things about Thai that's so remarkable is Theravada and Mahayana practice in many Buddhist minds are very distinct. It's like Catholic and Protestant.
Yeah.
And in Vietnam is the only Buddhist country where Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism intersect.
Yeah.
And Thai was a monastic, made a monk in the Mahayana tradition,
Yeah.
but he respects the Theravada and he blends them. And not only that, he encourages those who he can touch to also bring in your root tradition, whether it's Muslim or Christian or Wiccan, it doesn't matter. And he's sincere about that. So that's where I think he is a teacher for the modern age of spirituality, because he is so inclusive and sincere.
I will say actually also that Goenka, Vipassana and Goenka's teachings is he
Bridges.
Coming from the Theravada directly, like the Burmese Theravadan tradition. He has done the same thing with his method of offering Vipassana and being very inclusive to whoever comes, and very interesting stories where he's had like Catholic nuns and priests that have come to do Vipassana, and he, in the first Dharma talk, he talks like you do he encourages you to take refuge in the Dharma, Buddha Dharma Sangha for the term of that Vipassana session, just for that container of protection that you're going through as you're going deep into your mind in a Vipassana. But he encourages everyone. I mean, he's Hindu root that became essentially a Buddhist, but atheist, agnostic, whatever, it doesn't matter, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, all you're doing is these practices that are very scientific, that are very there's no, in the Theravadan tradition and Vipassana tradition, and but he's had these, he tells stories of how he's had Catholic nuns and priests that have come to do a Vipassana, and they told him afterwards that it was the first time they felt that they actually learned how to pray in their life.
Yes,
through
and
those practices.
Well, and that, as I shared with you about my son Elias, which I'm so looking forward to the two of you having a conversation. But when he was in Burma, and he took vows, shaved his head, had the robes placed, all of that, I can't say for certain whose overarching teaching he was under monastically, but there were, as exactly what you're saying, he was with people who came from all kinds of faith traditions, and indeed when the uprising started, they banded. There were Jewish rabbis, Catholic priests, nuns, Muslim hierarchs, everyone together. So I'm imagining that's what you're saying, and they
totally, yeah. And I mean, when you think about it, all Vipassana really is primarily is following your breath, concentrating your mind in the present moment, and then scanning your body for like 10 hours a day
Yeah.
for 10 days. And that sounds so simplistic, but the things that happen when you do that in healing and the insights that you have about your own life and your own being are so deep
And no
and
distractions.
profound. But there's no religion there.
Right.
It's just being, and it's science. It's just nature. You know, it's a cultivating an extremely strong state of mindfulness over a period of time, which opens up an energy experience that is, from the normal state of mind, supernatural, even though it's very natural.
Have you had Vipassana retreat experience in Asia?
Not in Asia, only here, yeah. And only in the United States. Yeah. I've never been to Asia.
I wonder what that would be like for you at this stage.
Well, I always feel though too. It's like it's like you said yesterday.
Well,
if God's not in the Coke bottle, then where is He?
True.
Like I always feel like, you know, you can find it everywhere. Though it would be, there is like,
There's
I
something.
really would love to go to Bodhgaya, like in my life. Yeah, for sure. But we'll see.
Well, there's every locale has
His story.
right,
Yeah.
and
then
again an energy
a residual energy.
that
Yeah.
that is definitely a component,
Yeah.
but certainly is not geographically necessary.
Yeah, totally.